It's me, MacLord, and today I'll be talking about Duel Links, but before I can talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links, I'm gonna have to talk about its parent game, Yu-Gi-Oh! In the 5Ds era, circa 2008-2009, Konami experimented with designing archetypes with specific weaknesses or conditions attached to them. For instance, Karakuri's were a somewhat consistent archetype for the time, with pretty strong support, but one key weakness: they had to attack if they could, which often didn't work out great with the starters' low attack values. Likewise, scraps had some pretty powerful effects, but often destroy themselves as well. Koa'ki Meiru's fit in this bunch. The entire archetype was designed around a spell card, Iron Core of Koa'ki Meiru, which does nothing except add itself from your hand to the graveyard in exchange for your draw or a Koa'ki Meiru monster in your hand. The point of this card is to enable the rest of the archetype. Your monsters had above average stats and effect, but needed you to discard an Iron Core to the graveyard in your end phase, or reveal a monster in your hand with the same type to stay on the field, and your back row pretty much asked you to always have a Koa'ki Meiru or monster on the field to function as well. So what happened if you didn't draw your Iron Core? Well, it's simple. You lose! Needless to say, when the archetype dropped in the TCG in 2009, it kinda bombed. Individual Koa'ki Meiru monsters did work in specific typo decks, like Koa'ki Meiru Drago in Dragon decks, or the trio of Guardian, Wall and Sandman in Rockstone decks, later assisted by Overlords in 2015, and even later on Supplier in 2020. But as its own strategy, Koa'ki Meiru never really took off. The release of Diamond Core in early 2014 was a huge boon to the archetype, giving it additional consistency and protection against their own maintenance costs, but that wasn't enough to have a major impact on a metagame dominated by Gergias, Dragon Rulers, and Hat decks. It did see some competitive play and is nowadays considered a tier 2 deck by the Hat format community, but in paper Yu-Gi-Oh at the time, Koa'ki Meiru never really achieved anything and quickly fell off once Duelist Alliance dropped and introduced Shadows and Tellarknights as the de facto new best decks that you could be playing. Also, this isn't related to anything really, but do you know why it's pronounced Koa'ki Meiru? It's because the Japanese name for this archetype roughly translates to Core Chimale, which makes me think it's a mistranslation of Core Chimera. Because, you know, the entire archetype is based around the Iron Core, and Koa'ki Meiru. I don't know how much of a revelation this is, but here you go. So anyway, the legacy of Koa'ki Meiru in the TCG and OCG is that of an archetype that never really found footing, but with individual cards good enough to see play in some very specific decks. Duel Links, however, is a completely different story. Koa'ki Meirus were first introduced to Duel Links in August 2018 with the release of the Gaia Genesis main box, which also included UAs and mermales. But unlike these two archetypes which shared premise, remember when people thought mermales would be tier 0? Koa'ki Meirus were mostly glanced over and ignored, considered too weak in a format defined by strong, consistent decks like vampires and... Oh god. Oh god. Oh, the memories, they're all coming back! No! No! The release of Revolution beginning on December 2018 changed everything. This set included several new shiny toys, the most important of which ended up being Diamond Core of the Koa'ki Meiru. Hey, that's the card we talked about earlier. This card single-handedly helped Koa'ki Meiru become the new best deck of early 2019, a spot it will hold on to for a while. But what exactly made Koa'ki Meiru so powerful? Let's take a closer look at the list that won the 54th edition of the Meta Weekly, where Koa'ki Meiru was by far the most represented and successful deck. Outside of the 3 Diamond Cores, which were pretty much mandatory, Koa'ki Meiru decks were also playing 3 Ben Knights. I wrote this joke in the script and I just realized it's incredibly dated and not funny, which allowed you to summon any Koa'ki Meiru monster from deck depending on what you needed. Sandman to disable traps, Wall to disable spells, and Ice to get rid of special summon monsters. Knight, more like our Knight. That joke is also terrible. On top of this, the deck was also running a playset of Maximus, a 3000 attack body which summons itself by sending an iron core from your hand to the Shadow Realm, and which could pop any card on the field once per turn. Back in 2019, that was incredibly powerful removal. Keep in mind that Mystical Space Typhoon wasn't in the game at that time, only Cosmic Cyclone, and removal in general was very few and far between. And last but not least, of course, Enemy Controller, one of the best, if not the best, staple at the time. On top of being a decent defensive tool, it also worked great as a way to make lethal pushes. Speaking of lethal pushes, Hatronade also saw a lot of play in this deck, as the cheesy OTK enabler we all know and... And Sphere Karibo also deserves a mention as one of the few ways to deal with an opponent's Trunade at the time. Other versions of the deck existed, one running the pre-nerf version of Balance for more defensive plays, and one leveraging Bandit as a way to recoup the life loss provoked by Solemn Scalding. Sealed Tombs was still the most frequent skill though. Following early tournament success, Koa'ki Meiru was immediately promoted to Tier 1, a position it has maintained until March 2019. It got 8 lists in the top 100 global rankings of the February 2019 KC Cup, and 2 in top 10, which was much lower than Ancient Gears or Vampires, the latter being one of the 2 decks being used by the rank 1 player Toon. Koa'ki Meiru still showed up as early as rank 3 globally, at the hands of Yanstorm, who placed first in the Latin America/Caribbean region. The ensuing ban list in March 2019 hit Koa'ki Meiru twice, putting Maximus to Limited 1 and Iron Core to Limited 2, hereby conflicting with Limited 2 staples like Enemy Controller and Hatronade. This has led the top player council of Duel Links meta to remove Koa'ki Meirus from the tier list entirely, while still saying that the deck could easily come back. And that's exactly what happened. Just a week after, Koa'ki Meiru shot back to tier 2 after some promising tournament results, then back to tier 1 the week after, then down to tier 2 again after 6 Samurai released in early April and ruined the game for everyone, then back to tier 1 confirming it as the next best thing you could be playing after 6 Samurai. The following ban list put Shien's Dojo to Limited 2, once again conflicted with the Limited 2 staples of the time, at which point the top player console moved it down from tier 0 to tier 1 alongside Koa'ki Meiru and the newly released Neos deck, which leveraged Neos Fusion as an incredible setup tool to the point where even Koa'ki Meiru decks started using it as well. In fact, Neos Fusions ended up being so powerful that in addition to taking Cyberdarks and Steel Swarm to top tier status, it ended up seeing more and more play in Koa'ki Meiru decks. Which then begs the question, is this a Koa'ki Meiru deck or a Neos deck? Or both? Or neither? Which of the two is the engine? Where did all my air go? Well, today's sponsor can help with the last question. This video is sponsored by... Nah, just kidding. But what Neos giveth, Neos taketh away. Neos decks rising through the metagame eventually led to the demotion of Koa'ki Meiru down to tier 2 in early May 2019, then down to tier 3 following a nerf to KC Bling. Oh my god! I'm editing this video right now and I just realized I completely forgot to talk about kaibacorp Bling. Okay, so for most of early 2019, Koa'ki Meirus were using Sealed Tombs as their de facto skill because it was the best skill in a format dominated by vampires. You just prevent vampires from doing vampire stuff. But as vampires fell off and other decks emerged, like Ancient Gears, Koa'ki Meiru decks turned to Ties That Bind. That was a decent skill. But also, and more importantly, kaibacorp Bling! And this is one of the silliest skills that was ever put into Duel Links before 2023. If your life points had decreased by 1,000 or more, you'd be able to draw a random glossy or prismatic card from your deck during your draw phase. This, probably made Konami a shitload of money from all the players going through boxes several dozens of times just to get glossy versions of the cards they already had 3 copies of. The messed up thing is, it used to ask you to lose 1800 life points up until January 2019, and it got buffed to losing only 1000 life points, which immediately made it so much more playable because Cosmic Cyclone exists. In fact, it was so playable that this skill single-handedly took Koa'ki Meiru to the first place of the April 2019 KC Cup in the middle of Tier 06 Samurai format. It's that stupid. And still way more balanced than the shit we have to deal with today. How do people play this game? And so, after the nerf to kaibacorp bling, Koa'ki Meiru fell down to Tier 3, then, predictably, back to Tier 2, and then Tier 1 again. What the fuck? Well, it turns out that Neo's Koa'ki Meiru wasn't such a pipe dream of a deck after all. It had a pretty decent showing at the 2019 regional representative qualifiers and established itself as the best Neo's Fusion variant, thanks to easy access to Koa'ki Meiru Ice, whose removal effects started getting more and more relevant as we started getting more decks that special summoned one monster and called it a day. A prime example of that were Blue Ice decks that emerged in mid-2019, some of which also ended up playing a small Koa'ki Meiru package just to get access to Ice. Like I said, removal was pretty hard to come by, even in 2019. But alas, no king rules forever. The rise of Red Eyes as the new best deck had a massive impact on Koa'ki Meiru's playability, since a Red Eye Slash equipped with part of the Guardians was just too much for a single Ice to take care of. Other new decks like Subterras, Triamids and Magnet Warriors proved to be much more consistent than Koa'ki Meiru as well. Adding on to that, Koa'ki Meiru suffered another hit with Diamond Core trading places with Iron Core on the limited 2 list, leading to a month of July where Koa'ki Meiru topped only one tourney, a respectable top 4 in Meta Weekly 80, but clearly not enough to save it from demotion in early July 2019. It did not even live long enough to see KC Bling get obliterated, turning it into a once per duel skill because of Dark Lords. Eventually, Diamond Core and Iron Core would trade places in December 2019, but by that time, we had reached early DSOD format, with much stronger and more consistent decks to deal with, so Koa'ki Meiru never came back in the metagame. Iron Core would stay limited to until December 2021, aka early Arc 5 era, and Maximus wasn't freed until September 2022, right before the release of Reigns World. Needless to say, neither of these unhits did anything to help the deck compete in a game where decks were progressively getting more and more dedicated skill to fix their consistency, among other things. But still, to be meta relevant from January 2019 to July 2019 is pretty impressive. Impressive enough that veteran Duel Links players still remember the deck as it was, oppressive and adaptable, rather than the steaming pile of wasted potential TCG players are more familiar with. The recent releases of Koa'ki Meiru Guardian and Supplier are far from enough to bring back this power crept archetype back into the forefront of the metagame. In fact, these two are mostly seeing play in Emancipators, which very similarly to how they were already being used by the same archetype in paper in 2020, just a year after their Duel Links dominance. With these two cards being released, there is no more support on the horizon for Koa'ki Meiru, barring an exceptionally busted skill because, let's face it, that's what makes any deck meta in this godforsaken era of Duel Links. And despite how terrible it turned out, I'll always appreciate Duel Links for being the game where so many underwhelming archetypes finally got their chance to shine, including Koa'ki Meiru. But what do you think of Koa'ki Meiru? What did you think then? What do you think now? Let me know in the comments of this video. Also, thank you for watching. I do hope that you appreciated that. I love making this history type of videos talking about whole Duel Links decks that no longer are playable. So I'm gonna make more of them, and hopefully you'll enjoy those as well. In the meantime, if you like this video, make sure to like it, comment a memory that you have with Koa'ki Meiru's, and subscribe if you haven't already. If you'd like to support me further, you can also check out my Ko-fi in the video description, where you can make a one-time donation or a monthly pledge, or become a YouTube channel member. I would now like to thank my Ko-fi donators in the forms of Dingus, Howdishboy0, Jimmy, Zinnia, Yannick, Sile, Mark Lou, 1416, the Abyss Actor Guru, Orc Price and Exorcist, And I would like to thank my YouTube members Sternay, Crimson Reaper 5, Genius Wannabe, Troy Bolton, and Seal Lelouch. Thank you all for the support. And that will be it for today. Hope that you enjoyed this video once again. Thank you for watching it one last time. Take care everyone, and I will see you all next time.